In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, welcome, friends, to Crime and Punishment, a legal podcast, not a political one. The official podcast of the Invictus Law Firm, PA, a criminal defense law firm in Orlando, Florida, the website for which is augustusinvictus.com. We switched to a new format last month, a bulletin format, where I would just pop in and read an article and get out back to work. You might have noticed we haven't done that in over a month, and that's because that new format just plain doesn't work. I've discovered something about myself, and it's that if I don't have it hard scheduled in the calendar, and I'm blocking off that time, and I'm getting it done today, it's not getting done. So we're going to go back to the old format. We're going to do this once a week, and just do the full hour. I've only got one article for today, though. That being said, it's a rather substantial article and a pretty important topic, so figure it's now or never. Good afternoon, Gigi. Greetings from Greece. Goodness. Well, greetings from Orlando, Doom Paul. Good afternoon from the East, Brian. Greetings, Mr. Frank. Everybody's here. The whole party's here. So let's talk about this awesome news. FBI doubles down on Christians and white supremacy in 2023. Of course, those things go together like peanut butter and jelly, or cocaine and waffles. I actually first heard about this from a friend who texted me about it. Somebody had talked about it on Twitter, but then the articles started coming out. And the first article I saw was on LifeSite News because they emailed me, but this originally came out on... what's the name? UncoverDC.com, which honestly I'd never heard of. And the journalist's name is Kyle Seraphin. This was leaked by someone in the FBI, a Baptist, who I guess had some crisis of conscience about these, pagan Catholic maniacs being targeted by the FBI. Amazing. FBI whistleblower releases documents showing agency is surveilling radical Latin Mass Catholics. Subtitle of this article is "The Memo Cited a 2021 study from the anti-Catholic Southern Poverty Law Center to justify the FBI's monitoring efforts." It's not just the SPLC either. The FBI has gone full bore on this internal memorandum, quoting Salon and The Atlantic as well as the SPLC. Let me go to the memo itself, because I love the top of this entire memo. It says unclassified for official use only, but then immediately under that, in giant red letters, bold, it says FBI internal use only. Do not disseminate externally. So you can only imagine the hell that is about to come down on this Baptist who leaked this paperwork to this guy. So I would read the LifeSite article. That was where the headline was from, but let's instead read "The FBI doubles down on Christians and white supremacy in 2023. This is on UncoverDC.com, because that's, to my knowledge, that's where it originally came out. It was leaked to this guy. But first, let's check to make sure the audio is looking good. Greetings from Slovenia? No way. We have a hot Slovenian girl listening? What's up, Alice? You married? Missouri Battle Flag. Greetings from Redacted, Colorado. Oh, Freedom Falcon. What's up, man? I love what Catholics believe. Well, thank you. And all right, so apparently we can hear what's going on here. So let's get to the article, now that the audio is working. The FBI's Richmond Division would like to protect Virginians from the threat of white supremacy, which it believes has found a home within Catholics who prefer the Latin Mass. An intelligence analyst within the Richmond field office of the FBI released a new finished intelligence product dated January 23, 2023, on racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, the acronym is RMVE, and their interests in radical traditionalist Catholics, or RTCs. The document assesses with high confidence the FBI can mitigate the threat of radical traditionalist Catholics by recruiting sources within the Catholic Church. Just the opening paragraph alone is so fundamentally disturbing. You know what? I'm recommending to everybody listening to this right now, you need to watch that HBO show Gunpowder with Jon Snow. I can't, for the life of me, remember his real name. But Jon Snow from Game of Thrones. He's the mastermind, I suppose. He's not really a thinker, but he's the impetus in the movie Gunpowder behind the Catholic plot to blow up the English Parliament. And it shows you the actual persecution of the Catholics by the English crown. It's incredible. It's incredible. You don't think that could ever happen. You don't think, well, these people just had a difference of opinion. The Protestants and the Catholics. And yeah, there were wars fought, but the people were basically happy. You know, they just had this divergence of theological opinion and they went their separate ways. No! Absolutely not. It was a vicious war on everybody who got in the way of the power, right? The secular power, that is. So I would recommend that show to everybody. But I'd say the most disturbing part in this entire paragraph is obviously the last sentence. The document assesses with high confidence that the FBI can mitigate the threat of radical traditionalist Catholics, that's RTCs, by recruiting sources within the Catholic Church. In other words, they're going to pay Catholics at these Latin Mass churches to act as informants against those people that they suspect of being white supremacists. Never done that before, right? This is totally new territory for the FBI. Government would never do anything like this. So, should we read the article? Let's read the article first, and then we'll go back to the document. The acronym, that is RTCs, new to many in the domestic counterterrorism field, comes with a footnote by the writer explaining that RTCs are, quote, typically characterized by the rejection of the Second Vatican Council, end quote. The writer makes an unsubstantiated leap that a preference for the Catholic Mass in Latin instead of the vernacular, and a number of more traditional views on other world religions can amount to an, quote, adherence to anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, and white supremacist ideology, end quote. This writer draws the important distinction between traditional Catholics, who simply prefer the traditional Latin Mass and pre-Vatican II teachings, and RTCs, who espouse more extremist ideological beliefs and violent rhetoric. In other words, not all traditional Latin Mass Catholics are bad. It's just the ones who talk about it. Those are the people we're targeting. And of course, it's not about the First Amendment. Everybody maintains their First Amendment rights. The FBI, we would never, ever persecute a group based on their religious beliefs. That's crazy. We're just concerned about criminal behavior. And obviously that criminal behavior is highly correlated with anti-Semitic speech, with anti-immigrant speech, with anti-LGBTQ speech, and obviously with white supremacist ideology. And all of these white supremacists, they're going to hide out now in the Catholic Church. Apparently there's a whole movement going on there where they realize the, I guess, futility of politics and went back home. I don't know. It sounds crazy to me. But the FBI seems to think that this is a whole thing where white supremacists are just migrating to the Catholic Church, and this is now the biggest group of anti-Semites in the United States. Well, they didn't just get that by paying off other Latin Mass parishioners to rat on their fellow Latin Mass parishioners. They got this from, of all places, the Southern Poverty Law Center. That's right. Quoting the Southern Poverty Law Center, quoting The Atlantic and Salon, this is what the FBI bases its persecutions on. I'm going to skip over this guy's, no Latin Mass purple person would ever believe these things, because that's ridiculous. Obviously, obviously, just it should go without saying, if you are Catholic, you are anti-LGBTQ, right? It should be without saying that if you are Catholic, you are anti-Semitic, right? Because they did kill Jesus, after all, right? So I'm going to skip over his whole, not all, Democrats are the real racist kind of nonsense, and go straight to the part about the Southern Poverty Law Center. The attached appendices refer to a number of articles and the out-of-FPI policy Southern Poverty Law Center at the end of the document. I don't know, man. I don't know Kyle Serafim. I don't know him personally. I don't know if this is just like his shtick to like stay mainstream. I don't know, but pretending that the FBI hasn't been relying on the SPLC this entire time. Like, I want to say it was 2018, 2019. The FBI finally published something that's like, all right, the SPLC is not neutral. We're not going to quote them anymore. That was like 3 or 4 years ago. And we're going to pretend like this wasn't just some public stunt because all the conservative Republican congressmen were after them about this. Obviously, they've been in cahoots with the SPLC the entire time. They just made a public statement saying otherwise. But now their internal document is leaked showing, oh, just kidding, we were relying on the SPLC for all this information. All the people we target, they're people that the SPLC doesn't like. For example, Appendix D is a direct copy of the SPLC list of radical traditional Catholicism hate groups, including the web address accessed. You might have missed this because anybody listening to this program, unless you are FBI, you probably don't pay attention to the SPLC because it's garbage. But they did publish an article about how radical traditional Catholics are the biggest group of anti-Semites in the United States. Well, that's now made it into an FBI internal memorandum. The SPLC description for this hate group states RTCs may make up the largest single group of serious anti-Semites in America. Often in the intelligence world, this type of statement without any established evidence is often followed by the acronym NFI, or no further information, to indicate it is an unsubstantiated opinion. Additionally, SPLC states RTCs, quote, embrace extremely conservative social ideals with respect to women, end quote. Nothing reported by the SPLC indicates the number of adherents to this alleged ideology, nor any instances of violence. This lack of evidence and blatant partisan blindness is one of the many reasons the FBI has distanced itself from the SPLC as a source in the past 10 years. Come on, Kyle. No, they haven't. But I don't know. Maybe this is how you keep your advertisers on uncoverdc.com. I don't know. This episode is probably getting us kicked off of YouTube today. So I fully get it, Kyle, but you know that's not true. The intelligence product includes endnote citations from 2 other sources, the far-left online magazine Salon and the equally left-leaning The Atlantic. The Salon articles cited are typical of partisan clickbait writing. Traditional Catholics and white nationalist groypers forge a new far-right youth movement. That's one article heading, and white nationalists get religion. On the far-right fringe, Catholics and racists forge a movement. That's the other article heading. These articles were released a day apart as a series, but include substantially the same information. The articles offer only circumstantial suggestions of affiliations between inflammatory figures like Milo Yiannopoulos and Nick Fuentes, and a man pictured standing on the steps of a Catholic church in New York after the Dobbs decision. See, again, like, what are you doing, Kyle? Milo publicly converted to Catholicism. Nick Fuentes has always been Catholic, whatever you think of the guy. It's like, are you going to seriously deny that this is true? Like, that Salon and The Atlantic were just going out on a limb, like trying to link these guys to the Catholic? They are Catholic, you know? It's not something you can get around. The Salon writer makes the wild leap that using a photo of someone at a church indicates the pictured individual or his beliefs are relevant within a religious institution with 70 million adherents in the United States alone, and over 2,000 years of tradition and history. All right, whatever. The writer determines that the threat picture involving RMVE, again, that's racially motivated violent extremists, I think, basically white nationalist, right? Again, in this case, referring to white supremacists, will increase, but that the RTC community, that is radical traditionalist Catholics, for those of you just joining us, is likely to remain relatively stable or show modest growth over the next 1 to 2 years. The basis for this assessment is not annotated and appears to be speculative. I'd say so because I know a lot of people who speculate that the traditional Latin Mass community is about to explode, given the recent explicit attacks by Pope Francis and all these liberal bishops. So, not like we'd ever accuse the FBI of being intelligent, right? Or of knowing what they're talking about. The FBI is good at one thing, and that's ruining people's lives. The speculative increase in RMV interactions with RTC leaders leads the writer to suggest mitigation strategies. Just think about that phrase for a minute. Mitigation strategies. To mitigate the growth of traditional Catholic Latin Mass bodies, right? Mitigation strategies. These people who go to Latin Mass are a threat to the national security of the United States of America. We need mitigation strategies to prevent this from growing. Those include recruiting confidential human sources, quote-unquote source development. Do you have any idea what that? It's not like it's, obviously that means they're going to pay people. That's informants, That's one of those just ridiculous, highfalutin sounding terms that intelligence people and government people use to make themselves feel smart. They're talking about paying informants within the parish. Tripwire and liaison contacts. Tripwires and liaisons are overt contacts with trusted members of a community or an industry. They can advise law enforcement about potentially illegal activity. Due to the fact that white supremacy is itself a First Amendment protected belief, to say nothing of proponents of the most established Christian denomination in the world, the Bureau tries to cover documents like these with a caveat, excusing their intrusion into the sacrosanct grounds of free exercise of religion and free association. In another typical intrusion into First Amendment concerns, the document implies a strategy of monitoring social media for RTC ideology and online posts. So, not only are they going to pay off people in your parish to inform the FBI about what you are up to, if they suspect you of being racist, but they're obviously monitoring your social media posts, which, unless you're just absolutely mentally retarded, you already knew that they were doing that, right? The impetus of the writer can be assessed. I do like this paragraph, Kyle. The impetus of the writer can be assessed by the fixation on abortion and the repeated use of the phrase abortion rights. Documents like these can be used to drive the FBI's priorities in specific regions and boost the visibility of non-existent threats. There is a reason the writer refers to the document as a first-of-its-kind domain perspective. It is generally out of bounds. However, intelligence products like this help focus on alleged hostility towards the abortion rights advocates, which the FBI has used to justify significant enforcement actions tied to the FACE Act. Americans will remember a flood of conservative news outlets covering arrests of numerous pro-life protesters at the end of 2022, which are coming back into focus after the January 30th, 2023 acquittal of defendant Mark Houck. While over 100 instances of attacks on pro-life pregnancy centers occurred in 2022, the SPLC reported an unsubstantiated 200 bombings or arson attacks on abortion clinics in the past 20 years. So let's unpack a lot of that. First of all, for those of you who are uninitiate, there is a massive civil war going on right now that stems back, what year is it? 60 years now. 60 years we've been dealing with this Vatican II Council, which is what they said. RTC means that you reject the Second Vatican Council, right? So back in the 60s, Catholic Church, it's a long story. The long and short of it is that's when they changed the Mass from Latin, which everybody in the world said the Mass in Latin, and it was the same everywhere. They changed that to, just do it in your own language. And you'd think that, they switched it over and all they did was translate it, right, into English. They translated it into Portuguese. They translated it into Russian or wherever you were. They just kept the same mass and translated it. No, actually not at all. They butchered the mass. They made it a completely different ritual. And they did this on purpose. And they hid it in changing it to the vernacular. And then they forced it on everybody. Massive drops in priests, massive numbers of people leaving the church. I mean, famously, the church has taken a massive nosedive since the 1960s. Confession, the sacrament of confession, absolutely cut off after Vatican II. Major bad shifts, and not like anything that anybody can deny. It's just like anything else in politics, right? You can find any reason except the actual reason, right? Like all these people dying suddenly right now. Not that I'm political or anything. It's just all these people dying suddenly, and you see them all on camera dying in the same manner, and they all happen to have the vaccine. Like that's the one thing, the one common denominator in all these people in all these different countries dying on camera in the same manner. They all had the same COVID vaccine, but no, it's anything but that. It's rise in temperature here. It's a drop in temperature there. It's something in the water here. It's any reason you can think of. Same thing with the Second Vatican Council. Yeah, sure, people completely stopped going to confession, and we've lost millions and millions and millions of people. Sure, the Catholic Church is now pro-gay and pro-abortion, and sure, all these horrible things have happened, and we destroyed all the churches, and Notre Dame, pardon moi, is now a tourist attraction. Sure, all these terrible things have happened, but you can't blame the Second Vatican Council for that. It's this reason, it's that reason, it's this other reason, it's blah, 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 any reason other than that. Don't look at the wizard behind the curtain. So that's an RTC. Someone who has enough common sense to look at the obvious reason for all of these horrible things happening, right? That's one thing going on in this article. The other thing is this. What he's talking about in this paragraph, there was a massive uptick in arrests by the FBI of people violating the FACE Act, which is don't block entrances to abortion clinics, don't harass people who perform abortions, which for some reason we're not calling murderers. All these things in the FACE Act, everybody is getting raided by the FBI in the latter half of 2022, as if by magic, right after the Roe v. Wade decision was overturned by the United States Supreme Court. It's obvious cause and effect, right? So they set up this one guy, Mark Hook. He was acquitted. And now, FBI is saying, okay, well, I guess we can't do that. Let's instead just start going after Catholics explicitly and say what we did to the white nationalists. This has nothing to do with your political views. We're only monitoring criminal behavior. If you've got nothing to hide, why do you care if we're paying off your fellow parishioners to spy on you? You know, growing up in the Cold War, I've said this a lot on this show. My father was an attorney. I was told my whole life about all the horrible things the KGB was doing, or had done after the Berlin Wall fell, right? And it was all over. All these horrible things, KGB this, KGB that. Like, can you name a thing that the KGB did or allegedly did that the FBI has not already been shown to be doing for decades? Like, possibly the greatest act of projection in modern times, right? The Russians did this. The KGB did that. The Russians, blah, blah, blah. The Russians had everybody spying on all their neighbors. You know, the Russians were making people disappear. The Russians were, chilling free speech and anti-democracy and using doublespeak and all that. The FBI does every single thing we accuse the KGB of doing. So this anti-abortion activist phenomenon where they're all being arrested, is this a surprise to a single person? What is surprising is now they are explicitly persecuting a particular Catholic sect, right? And this isn't like, targeting David Koresh and saying, look at those weirdos, that are marrying young girls and they've got guns and, like this is not translatable. This is an actual religion, like the religion that conquered the entire world, like, the foundation of Western civilization. This is what the FBI is targeting now explicitly. I think it's exciting. It's about bloody time that somebody puts something, for stake. There's something worth persecuting. There's something worth dying for, right? That's the whole point of Catholicism. So I think it's a great turn of events, and really points out the Muslims are right about one thing: America really is the great Satan. This tremendous statistical mismatch usually would have led federal law enforcement, this is the article by the way, federal law enforcement to focus on the highest threat, but the increasingly leftist bend of FBI enforcement actions appears to have ignored this trend. It also appears the writer is simply assuming RMVEs, that's fancy acronym for basically white supremacists, share common cause with conservatives, including practicing Catholics, on issues about abortion, immigration, affirmative action, and LGBTQ protections. This editorial bias should give the reader of this document a medium to high confidence the intelligence analyst is the product of left-leaning higher education and leftist values. Again, very neutral way of saying it. Obviously, Kyle, the person writing the FBI memo, is a leftist. Duh. This piece concludes with the incredible leap that RMVEs, or white supremacists, pose a threat to use RTC social media sites, no examples given, or places of worship as facilitation platforms to promote violence. Amazing! I don't even know, what is an RTC social media site? CatholicMatch.com? What RTC social media site is there that I'm not aware of? Places of worship as facilitation platforms to promote violence. In other words, all these lunatic white supremacists are going to Catholic Church to promote violence. That is an actual stance by the FBI. Amazing. This intelligence product is indicative of a permissive tolerance within the FBI for left-leaning ideological actors who use academic-sounding rhetoric to cover a dearth of personal experience. That's funny, actually. The weaponization of the FBI against conservative Americans can be seen in the way documents like this are published and distributed. Poorly sourced and highly speculative intelligence products lead to opening badly articulated predicate investigations into Americans in violation of their God-given First Amendment protected civil liberties. Yeah, so retards are in the FBI, and they're going to Wikipedia for their research, and they think the SPLC is like a legitimate journalist, outfit. Like, you have to be stupid to think that the SPLC, Salon, and The Atlantic are like legitimate outlets, right? Or you have to be no offense, dear listener, a 20-something who is in college and doesn't know his elbow from a hole in the ground, in order to believe that someone like The Atlantic or Salon or the SPLC is like some bastion of academia and intelligence. So obviously, the FBI is hiring retarded people that are just on board with the political agenda, which I know, FBI, you don't have a political agenda. All you care about is criminal activity. I've heard that a million times. I've heard it as someone in politics. I've heard it as a criminal defense attorney who's, the only person standing in the way between the FBI and my client. I've heard that just insane line. We don't care about politics. We just care about criminality. I've heard that so many times. It's like a bad catchphrase in a sitcom. While most Americans are familiar with criminal investigations, which explore the allegation or information that a crime is being committed, many are not familiar with intelligence investigations. In contrast to the linear nature of a criminal case, counterintelligence and counterterrorism cases follow a circular path that can continue indefinitely without any articulated goal. Indeed, information is the goal of these types of cases. Many counterterrorism cases never articulate or uncover a single criminal act. Yet they continue in order to develop more understanding of the threat landscape or threat pictures, as quoted in this document. Intelligence investigations often beget more investigations. The relevance of this product should not be lost on the reader. Products like this can be used to support products like the internal memorandum that's under discussion here. That's what he means by products or intelligence products. Products like this can be used to support the opening of information-only cases, and there is no reason to expect radical traditionalist Catholics are the end point of this train track. They will be the beginning. I disagree with you there, Kyle, respectfully. Maybe white nationalists weren't the beginning. Maybe communists were the beginning, under Hoover back in the day. Maybe that was the beginning of all this, and we shouldn't have allowed the FBI to get out of hand back when they did. But RTCs are certainly not the beginning of this whole thing. This has been going on for a long time. It's heartening to see that, the mask is finally coming off. Opening the door to associating white supremacists with traditional religious practices based on common Christian positions on abortion and the LGBTQ political agendas is a dangerous step, says Kyle. Such investigations can easily lead to the same analysis of radical traditional Baptists, radical traditional Lutherans, okay, Kyle, and radical traditional evangelicals. Dog, I think he needs a crash course in what exactly radical traditional Catholic means. But otherwise, Kyle, great article. I don't mean to rain on the parade. It's good article, man. Excellent journalism. Well done. The FBI is forbidden from opening cases or publishing products based solely on First Amendment protected activities. By tolerating the publishing of intelligence products as shoddy as this, they are crossing a line many Americans will find themselves on the wrong side of for the first time in history. This is what a politicized FBI looks like. It should not be tolerated if Americans expect to enjoy the protections of our Bill of Rights. Oh, I guess Kyle himself is a former FBI special agent. Interesting. Former FBI special agent, federal whistleblower, and veteran of the U.S. Air Force. A confirmed Catholic and father of 3, he hosts The Kyle Seraphin Show, a podcast and syndication by Uncover DC. You can follow him on Twitter and Truth Social at Kyle Seraphin, where he regularly exposes inside information from those in the FBI who cannot share personally. God bless this American hero. I love you, Kyle. So, that's the article for today. I suppose we could look at the memorandum itself. I feel like Kyle really did a good job of covering what was in there, though. Let's see. The title of this article, internal memorandum, Interest of Racially or Ethnically Motivated Violent Extremists in Radical Traditionalist Catholic Ideology almost certainly presents new mitigation opportunities. I love how the FBI thinks it's an opportunity when they get to mitigate the speech or the worship or the activities of Catholics. I love how they find that's an opportunity. It's a really half glass full kind of thinking, very optimistic, very, very much feeder mentality, as Master Chim would say. I like it. Mitigation opportunities. I like that they're on fire about that. Let's go to the chat. Let's see. All right, we got some religious statements in here. Something about 30 pieces of silver, says Doom Paul. White sauce Supremo pizza. I don't know what we're talking about there, Joshua, but that sounds delicious. I wouldn't want to see the FBI being close to the SPLC if that's keeping their distance the last decade. Yeah, right. Right. If the last 10 years the FBI has been not following everything the SPLC tells them to do, like, could you imagine if they actually teamed up? Be out of control. Vatican II says people can go to heaven without believing in Christ, including the tribe. Says love is everything. Well, I don't know if it says it that explicitly, but yes, that's what everybody takes from it. Yeah, and that's kind of why you'd see a pope like posing with a Buddha statue, or allowing the worship of a Mesoamerican goddess at the Vatican. Like, once the rules are gone, like, why not? Doom Paul was about to comment that these techniques remind him of the East German Stasi, and the control of the church reminds of PR China doing similar things. Yeah, the Stasi. I always use the KGB as the example, because that was always the one that was in my home when I was being brought up as a kid. But yeah, the Stasi, that's a good point. We confessional Lutherans are as traditional as it gets. Ashley, we're gonna have a debate here. No such thing as traditionalist evangelical, though. Yeah, all right. Well, at least we're on the same page there, Ashley. He's talking about readers of Martin Luther's book on a group of individuals and their lies. I have no idea what you're talking about, and definitely don't look that up, dear listener. We don't talk about such groups on this program. Let's see. Increasingly observed interest of RMVEs, again, that's basically white supremacists, for those who are new to the program, in RTC ideology, that is radical traditionalist Catholics, almost certainly presents new opportunities for threat mitigation. It's like they just love that phrase, opportunities for threat mitigation. We get to go in and disrupt people and surveil them and do all these things. This is such an opportunity. I do like their gung-ho attitude. I will say that. There's a lot blacked out. And you know what? I'm going to share the link. Probably should have done this as soon as we started, right? There you go. Link's in the chat. So you can see the memorandum itself, and there's a lot blacked out in here. Can only imagine what that is. Hold on. Did that say what I think it said? Analyst note. Oh, pure gold. The Society of St. Pius X, SSPX, is an international priestly society that promotes the traditional Catholic priesthood and the celebrations of the traditional Latin Mass and sacraments. It is named after Pope Pius X, whose anti-modernist stance serves as the organization's inspiration. The SSPX is currently considered canonically irregular, i.e. not in full communion with the Vatican. The SSPX has spawned a number of offshoots. These include SSPX Resistance, the SSPX Marian Corps, which rejected SSPX attempts to reconcile with the Vatican, the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, FSSP, which holds to many of the SSPX beliefs and practices, but ultimately split from the SSPX to stay in full communion with the Vatican, and the Society of St. Pius V, SSPV, which does not consider Vatican II valid and binding, questions the legitimacy of all the popes since Vatican II, and has no canonical standing, i.e. is schismatic. That is the analyst note inside the memorandum. I did not catch that the first time through. Let's see. Outlook. This is likely to increase. White supremacist interest in radical traditionalist Catholicism is likely to increase over the next 12 to 24 months in the run-up to the next general election cycle, complicating the overall white supremacist threat picture while also creating new opportunities for mitigation efforts. I love it. These white supremacists are all going to turn Catholic, And that could, disrupt the election that, of course, the FBI has a great interest in, even though they don't care about politics, but they only care about criminal behavior. But this gives us opportunities for mitigation efforts. I wonder what that means. This assessment is made in light of the ongoing polarization characterizing the U.S. political environment and the probability that policy issues of mutual interest to white supremacists and Catholic adherents will remain in the public spotlight. Catalyzing events in which white supremacists and traditionalist Catholic adherents might have common cause include legislation or judicial decisions in areas such as abortion rights, immigration, affirmative action, and LGBTQ protections. During this same 12 to 24 month period, the overall traditional RTC community is likely to remain relatively stable or show modest growth based on potential disaffection with mainline Catholic churches on social issues in the aforementioned areas, providing white supremacists a persistent Catholic-oriented base with which to interact. So the FBI's assessment of this situation is this whole persecution of the Latin Mass by Pope Francis and all these liberal bishops, it's actually because those Latin Mass guys are bigots. Everybody coming from the Novus Ordo Church into the Latin Mass, they're really just bigots at heart. They hate gays, they hate black people, they hate immigrants. So they're only going to the Latin Mass because, those people are conservatives. Nothing to do with theology. Nothing to do with the total destruction of the Catholic Church by the Catholic Church itself. That's the FBI. Never accuse the FBI of having good intelligence. Anyway, that's basically the picture here. That's the article. That's the internal memorandum. You've got the link, all right? Magnolia Madam says, I went to a lovely traditional mass this weekend with my sister. Amazing. Now she's ready to come back to the church. Even better. I am so happy she had no interest in the Novus Ordo Mass. Yeah, once you go to the Latin Mass, it's over, right? You can't put that cat back in the bag. Once people realize there is a Latin Mass and all this modernist garbage that came after 1960, like there's an alternative to it. Like you can go back to the way it was. You can go back to the actual religion without all the guitars and hand-holding and kumbaya. And once you realize that, it's like, why would you ever go back? So many people, millions. I mean, not like, your neighbors and your friends that you grew up with. I mean, millions, countless millions of people have left the church over the past 60 years because of the Novus Ordo Mass. It's cause and effect. But no, that's fine, FBI. You can talk about how it's all about black people and immigrants and homosexuals. Like that's clearly what this whole thing's about. So anyway, everybody gets the point. That's the article for today. We're going back to the old format. With crime and punishment. Obviously, the other one doesn't work. Seamus says, that's a fact. Mass in Latin is the truth. And my friend Mr. Robertson says, the Mass loses its beauty when it abandons the tradition that it was built upon. 100%. So, from this time forward, we will go back to the old way, and I'm going to start doing crime and punishment once a week, do the hour-long. I guess today was only like 45 minutes, but we're going back to this format because it's just, if I don't do it, crime and punishment's not getting done. So we will check in with you next week, everybody. Thanks for stopping by.
Journeys in America, no tricks at the wheel. No one needs anyone, they don't even just pretend. Journeys in America, I'm afraid of Americans. Johnny wants to think of a joke. Johnny's in America. I'm afraid of Americans. I'm afraid of the world. I'm afraid I can't help it. I'm afraid I can't. I'm afraid of Americans. I'm afraid of the world. I'm afraid I can't help it. I'm afraid I can't. I'm afraid of Americans. Johnny's in America. Johnny looks up at the stars. Johnny combs his hair and Johnny wants to be seeing cars. Johnny's in America. Johnny's in America. I'm afraid of Americans. I'm afraid of the world. I'm afraid I can't help it. I'm afraid I can't. I'm afraid of Americans. I'm afraid of the world. I'm afraid I can't help it. I'm afraid I can't. Yeah, I'm afraid of Americans. I'm afraid of the worst. I'm afraid I can't help it. I'm afraid I can't. I'm afraid of Americans. God is an American. God is an American.